I'm always like, yes, but maybe you want to keep that side job to make sure you can pay your bills because then that's a place of power. Instead of coming into my business with urgency and scarcity and desperation, right? That's palpable. That's never going to be a good productivity system. But if I come in with abundance and excitement and passion and purpose, because I know that at least my job at Starbucks is paying for my bills, now all of a sudden I can give fully to this new thing without having to stress all the time.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the weekly episode of the Mayn Idea podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Jill Coleman. For those looking for specific tidbits, I now include chapters in the show notes below. Feel free to jump around to the segment that interests you most, although I recommend listening to the episode in its entirety. In 2010, Jill Coleman was a personal trainer with 7 fitness magazine covers to her name. She quit her lucrative job instructing fitness classes for over 70 hours a week to launch her online platform, JillFit, which in its first 18 months grew to over 100 virtual clients and 5 specialized fat loss coaches. Over the next few years and through the pandemic, JillFit has helped over 10,000 women change their lives by implementing her Moderation 365 nutrition philosophy. Recently, Jill began guiding other professionals through her business mentorship offering, Best of You, which has grossed over $6 million in revenue. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Without further ado, Jill Coleman. Awesome. Well, Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I know that living similar lifestyles, you're extremely busy, so I appreciate you carving the time out of your schedule.
It is my pleasure. I'm super excited to chat.
I'd like to talk about something that might be maybe a little bit more personal, but I think it'll give really good grounds to this conversation, and we can jump into a lot of different areas from that. So, if you look at who you are and the projection on social media, it is very put together. You have your businesses in line, you have a healthy lifestyle that you're living, and a clear awareness of kind of the journey that you've gone through to get there, to become who you are and to know where you're at in your life, letting go of some things and holding on to others. You had an interesting experience in finding love and then having that flipped up on its head. Mm-hmm. And so I was hoping that you could maybe touch a little bit on that experience, what it was like to go through that, and then from there we can kind of segue into how life then got to where it is today.
Yeah, so I started JillFit in 2010, and at the time I was living in North Carolina. I was working full-time as a personal trainer, and I was also starting to grow the business as a blog. And at the time I was married to a man who was 8 years older than me. He was also in this space. He owned a company called Metabolic Effect, which I got involved in, and he's a naturopathic physician, super smart guy. And because I think he was a little bit older, he sort of took on like a mentorship role a little bit, sort of like helping me with my career and helping me, giving me that possibility mindset and kind of allowing for me to see avenues outside of just being a personal trainer, which is an amazing career. I was a personal trainer for over a decade in the fitness industry since I was 16, absolutely love this space. But I was at the point of burnout. And so helping me sort of like navigate the online space as a blogger and social media and all that kind of stuff. And we had been married for about 5 or 6 years. And for me, it was like, this is my guy. This is my person. We're building this life together. We're building these businesses together. And I found out in 2014 that he had an affair. And it is something that you sort of like know happens in relationships, but you sort of don't think that you are going to be one of the relationships. I think we typically think about people have affairs, or there's infidelity in like bad marriages, or like it's because like the wife is wrong. Like a nag, or like, yeah, they're not being intimate anymore. Like you kind of think about all these sort of traditional things, and that wasn't our story at all. And so there's a lot of, obviously for me, there's a lot of shame, but the sort of irony of the whole situation was the affair had ended. It had been over for about 18 months when I found out. He actually told me, by the way, so I didn't like catch him in the act or anything. Someone actually, he confessed. And so we still wanted to work on the marriage. We ended up staying together for another year, trying to like work through things, but it just was it was impossible. And as a result of that, I ended up literally within a week deciding that I wanted to move across country. And I packed up everything I owned in my car and I drove across, and I I got an apartment in Santa Monica, and that's how you and I connected, because I obviously joined the gym the second I got there. And that was in 2015. And from there, I didn't know anyone in LA, but I knew it had a big fitness scene. And so for me, that was sort of the answer, was figuring out how to then, navigate a new life as a single person in a brand new place, and still be able to build my business and what that looked like. So yeah, it's one of those things where we've talked openly about it. I have a podcast called The Best Life Podcast, and my co-host and I have very similar experiences with this. Both of us married for 10 years, infidelity on the part of the husband, and then sort of leaving the marriage and trying to like navigate that after marriage, divorce, things like that. And because of that, we get a lot of questions. We get a lot of people kind of coming out of the woodwork saying, I went through something similar, and so it really is so much more common. And most people actually stay together. Most people actually try and work through it and stay together and sort of, redefine the relationship. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case for what I was able to do. But there's a lot of shame that goes into it. And as much as society wants us to be like, oh, that's the perpetrator and you're the victim, and like want to kind of pin you in those spaces, you don't feel like that. It doesn't feel good to just talk shit about him or like say he's an asshole. Like, that wasn't my experience. My experience is like, this is someone I loved. And while it's a mistake and I don't condone that behavior, I had to look at myself too and go like, cool, like how did I contribute to us getting to this place? And I don't blame him and I don't blame myself, but it took a long time to get to that place of like really trying to stay clinical with it and really just ask myself, what are the lessons here for me? Instead of pointing fingers or blaming or complaining or being in the victim role, it's like asking yourself, like, how can I get better as a result of this experience and move forward?
So that one of the things I want to ask you about is kind of the timing on this, because I feel like, one, it's interesting what you said about how you perceive infidelity to occur. Like, if you just kind of think about like, like somebody cheating on somebody else, it really is that walk into the bedroom moment and, oh my God, and it's in your face and you yell at each other and you leave. And the reality is that for a lot of people, it's not. It's something where maybe, there is something that couldn't be solved, or in your case, something that ended a long time ago that's kind of gone and done. But that doesn't make it okay. And it also doesn't make it a place where you need to stay and you need to be there and just tucker it out. But,
well, and that's what's hard about it, right? Is because you go, how can I heal from this while also not condoning the behavior? And that was really the biggest challenge for me, was like, how can I work this? And a layer on the fact that we were sort of a public couple, I wouldn't say we're like a power couple or anything, but both of us had online audiences and online presence, and people knew us together as a couple within the fitness internet space. And so that was like added an additional layer of shame, and you're trying to like work through things, and it's like,
publicly,
how do I heal and move forward without just blaming this person and just, I don't know, like, to me that doesn't feel, and I know a lot of people do that and it works for them, where they just find out and they immediately leave and they never talk to the person again. But for me, I wanted to learn more about myself as a result of the experience.
This is a new thing for the last 50 years, is having a relationship that is entirely shared with other people that you don't know. A while ago, you have a relationship within your community, your family knows, your close friends know. Something happens, you kind of have to speak to those that you have intimate and personal relationships with, hear the chatter, hear the peanut gallery, make your decision, go forward. When you choose to share your life and everything that you do socially, there's some huge upside. It's very vulnerable. People feel like they can connect with you. They get to know part of you that's not really available to them, because maybe you're in Los Angeles, but they live in Idaho or whatever. And so as that happens, the vulnerability is a strong connector, and that can create long-term relationships, long-term engagement. And not that that's what you're after directly, but it does strengthen your individual or your joint brands. On the flip side of that, when something ends, it ends in front of everybody also. So did you feel like when this was happening, you had to navigate this companies, brands, personal relationship, identity? Like, how did you get through that part of it?
For sure. I mean, I think that's the thing, is no one gets married thinking they're going to ever be divorced, Right. So yeah, we had completely, we were completely enmeshed, our businesses and things like that. And so luckily, and this is one of the things that we talk a lot about on The Best Life, and the reason why I do the work I do with helping women build their online brands, is because I feel very passionately that women need to have financial independence. And I was lucky enough to have that, to be able to, you know how rent is in Santa Monica, like to be able to literally pack up all of my stuff, move across country and have an apartment in Santa Monica. You know, you can go anywhere, but for me, that was just a moment of gratitude. And so when I left, the day that I left my marriage, I drove 16 hours the first day and landed in St. Louis, got in around 9 o'clock at night. And it was like just the worst day of my life, right? Just the absolute worst day of my life. And I get there and I'm alone, I'm tired, I'm crying all day off and on in the car. And I sat in the hotel room and I just said, you know what, Jill, if you can find just like 5 things to feel grateful for today, like on this day, then it's not going to be that bad. And I did. I still have my note. It's in my notes app on my phone. And it literally says things like, you know, the chance to meet new people in Los Angeles, the chance for business opportunities in Los Angeles. Like everything was like forward facing. And I think it's really important in those moments to find these like little tiny, shiny things when you're in. And that's really what the best life is about, is being able to actively choose your attitude, even when things around you are absolutely blowing up, like your marriage. And so I think one of the hardest things navigating like public facing dissolution of the relationship was more that people felt really attached. Like you had mentioned, they get to know you. I was a blogger. So like, you know, it wasn't like
sharing everything
once a week. It was like every single day we blogged and people knew my personal life and my family and, you know, whatever. And so they felt really invested in that relationship. And so I didn't share about our divorce and infidelity until I was right with it. I wasn't available for comments. I wasn't available for like, what happened? Or, you know, have you guys tried this? Here's a, you know, here's a relationship counselor. Like I wasn't available for that because I'd already worked through everything. So I even said, when I emailed my list and shared it, that was where I shared it first. I said, I'm not available for advice or open questions. I said, we worked everything front ways, sideways, backwards, up and down. We looked at all the angles and this is the right choice and I'm good with it. So I think it's really important if you have a personal brand that you have some kind of, I would say you've worked through it at least 90% of the way there before you start sharing it publicly. There's a lot of sort of different schools of thought of like, should you go through a struggle in real time with your audience? And I feel like that's a disservice to your audience. I think that's like dumping, like that's emotionally dumping. There's like a codependency there that I don't love. So for me, it was really important that I had already worked through and figured out what my take was on it before I was opening it up to my audience. Now I knew people are savvy, so they sort of were like, why are you in Los Angeles? Why isn't your husband there? Like they were sort of picking up hints and I got some messages, you know, I never responded to those DMs until I was ready. And then we just started with the podcast and I think that was the best way to have a more nuanced conversation about it. But people really felt betrayed because they knew him and he is a stand-up guy.
That's so betrayal is that's a strong fucking word. Betrayal is a real deal. Like to actually feel betrayed by somebody that you know, but you don't know them. Like you don't know them like you would call them to join you and your close family for dinner.
Right.
If my best friend from growing up called me today, who I talk to weekly, and told me he felt betrayed by me, I would be distraught. I mean, that would be devastating. And I would want to know everything that I did and exactly how I can fix it as quick as possible.
Yep.
But to feel betrayed by people that you have built a relationship with and that you exchange feelings and thoughts and emotions and ideas, but that you don't know directly, that must have been so interesting.
It was. I never really took it on personally. I mean, and by the way, it was on both sides. Right. You know, some people said like, "Oh, I can't believe you let him get away. He's such a great catch." You know, like maybe like,
well, you don't know.
I was like, "You can have at him."
Yeah,
like I'm good.
Go for it.
Yeah. So you know, and he's, and I think, it's interesting. I don't know if you know, there's actually a term for this. It's called parasocial relationships, where your online audience feels really close to you, and that's not fabricated. That's true. They truly do know me, or they know you, or whatever. And just like we know, I don't know, reality show television stars, whoever we follow,
right?
You really do know that person, but then they don't know anything about you. And so this is sort of an aside. So when I got to LA, I started dating, got on some apps, and went out with a guy who actually had followed me. And it was the strangest thing because he knew so much about me. So he already felt like we were like 10 steps into a
Right,
relationship.
you were further along.
And I was like, I don't even know where you're from, right? Like, and so that was a really interesting, and we only went on a couple of days because I was like,
I'm
this is
sure.
weird. But yeah, that was really strange. And so I think for all of us, like, you know, we think about the Kardashians or whatever, like we know so much about them and, you know, whatever. So this is obviously a much smaller scale. So I think it's interesting to sort of check yourself when you feel betrayed by these people who you may have put on a pedestal. I think that's sort of resist the temptation to put someone on a pedestal. This is why when we see, you know, this celebrity got a DUI, we're like, them, I can't believe they're such a great singer or whatever. Like, you know, it's so strange. But to your point, it is a really interesting kind of social experiment to ask ourselves why we feel so attached to these people. I mean, the only difference between me or you or the Kardashians is they just have more followers. Like literally, that's the only difference. Nothing special about that person. Nothing special about, they just maybe started their business earlier. They grew an audience for a longer period of time.
Or in the right time too.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
They were able
It
to
doesn't mean
capitalize
they're
on the right time.
better than, or they have something you don't. It's just, they just started earlier. Really, that's it.
When you think back to, you said an interesting thing in your reflection of the time that you left, right? That you got to this place and you said, no matter what, I'm going to write down 5 things that I just like, I need to get my head in the right space to do this, to get through this crying 16-hour day. What psychologically prepped you to do that? Because that's a specific choice that you made, whether it was by your own design in the moment or if you were conditioned through your life to decide to act that way. Because I feel like in a lot of situations, whether it's a relationship, whether it's the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one, you're immediately placed at a fork in the road, and there's a lot of different ways to handle it. And sometimes, in my case, you know, I've handled those the opposite way, the more destructive way, the bad way, several times to then learn that's not worth it. It's not worth my expenditure of emotion and despair and all this stuff over spilt milk. So how did you get to a place where that was how you handled it? What led itself to Jill choosing that way?
That's such a great point, because I agree with you. I don't think it's just a given. And my 20s, I always talk about this. When I was in my 20s, I was really lucky to have a mentor. His name is Julius, and he was in North Carolina as well. And around like a few years before I found out about my ex-husband's affair, I saw like a couple things, same woman, but I saw like an email or two that like looked a little sketchy, but I didn't know exactly what was happening. And he was like, nothing is happening, and I chose to believe him.
This is the woman that was the okay.
Yeah, the mistress or whatever. And so years, like maybe 3 years before that, 2011, I kind of found out maybe something had been going on, but it wasn't very clear. And I believed him when he said nothing was happening or whatever. So at that point, I was sort of devastated, and I was really looking for tools. I had shared with a couple of my girlfriends what had happened or what the emails that I'd seen or whatever, and they were like, oh, he's an asshole, and like, you know, whatever. It was just like very, like, it was great, like, you know, cheerleader, teammates, whatever, but it never made me feel better. You know, I'm like, yeah, but it never progressed things for me emotionally. And it was at that time that I was introduced through a mutual friend to Julius, who actually is ironically like a cardiologist, but he actually just loves personal development, and started introducing me to like self-help. And I remember feeling really self-conscious. I went into Barnes and Noble, and I went to the self-help section, and I was like, can anyone see me? Does anyone know me here? Like, I was so like, I hope no one sees me buying these books, right? Which is interesting, because now personal development is like kind of cool. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, that's what you want to do. But at the time, I had a lot of shame around it. Like, I just need these self-help books. Something's wrong with me, you know? And I was really lucky to get into personal development. And as a fitness person, I was always interested in the science. So I started with positive psychology, because I was like, oh, there's some research here, which if you are interested in positive psychology, is an amazing book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor. And like one of the tools in the book is a gratitude practice, like the 3 gratitudes. And so I like that because I'm a strategy person. I don't like to just think happy thoughts or, you know, sit in front of a mirror and repeat affirmations. I want to do something. And so when I know that there's a practice that can in real time change my perception of the world, like that's what mindset is, right? Mindset's just your perception. It's how you're viewing it, how you choose to view it. And so I was lucky that by the time I heard about the affair and ended up leaving the marriage in 2015, I had years of practice, and I had read a ton of books that were all about self-awareness and self-compassion. And like, so the shame and the embarrassment of the affair didn't quite affect me probably as much as it would have had I not done that work. And so I knew that was a tool, and I was like, I got to pull out all the tools in my tool belt to get through this. And so, yeah, that was it. And once I started doing personal development work, I really got into Byron Katie's work. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of her. She's like just this like grandmother type, but she's very grounded. I love personal development, but I'm not very woo-woo. I like tactical stuff. I like tangible. I like tools. I like the kind of assessments and really like learning about yourself.
Sound like a trainer.
Right. I'm like, yeah, what are we going to do though?
Want to make progress. We got to know where we're starting.
So I was lucky that I already had that practice in place.
When you think about self-help, and I've shared that same experience of being in the Barnes & Noble with the towering aisles over your head, and you're like, I hope none of my friends know that I'm here. Exactly. Only for that to become popular and commonplace. Totally. One thing that I have felt recently is that there's so much self-help that some of it almost feels disingenuous. But I go back to something that you touched on, which is this preparation of your mindset. Like, you're like, I had just consumed so much of this by the time that moment occurred in my life, that I really do think that there is this accumulation factor with self-help stuff. Not that you have to necessarily agree with every single point in every single book that you read or latch on to someone's perspective and go all the way with them. But when you do consume a lot of this information in general, you start to passively walk away with these concepts that almost just underline your general plane of thought, to look for a solution rather than identify the problem. Like those little things that you do. And I remember when going back to when I was like 15, I would read like Stephen Covey's books, 7 Habits, because I wanted to be a better skier. I wanted to do everything that I could possibly do to become a better athlete. And if that meant that I had to think about being a better athlete all the time, visualize stuff at night, whatever it was, I was game. That led me into this direction of reading a lot of these books about how to compound positive thinking and everything. Mm-hmm. And I really do think it adjusts the way that you think and how you view things. Not that you end up in this eternal blissful state, because you're certainly going to experience despair and sadness and dips and highs and lows and everything. That's part of it. But it does help to restabilize you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that I always think about is a lot of people think action happens, reaction happens immediately, right? So say you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off in traffic. What do we immediately do? Oh, this fucking asshole. And like we immediately, but one thing I learned and one thing my mentor helped me was realizing there's a little bit of time between action and reaction to where we have a choice. And this is where I love that there's a tangibility to personal development, because I think like you touched on earlier, 90% of personal development really is awareness. It's intellectually understanding how you want to be in an ideal world. Someone cuts you off, it's like, oh, benefit of the doubt. I'm sure they're going somewhere. They're busy. They're doing their best, right? Like so intellectually we get that. We get that that's the more evolved response, but it's hard to do in practice, right? So 90% of it is the awareness. We can sit here and read books all day long and go, yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And to me, the real work happens in that last 10% of the time, when the rubber meets the road and you have an opportunity to do something different. So I could have stayed in my marriage, and it would be fine if I did, complain about him and blame him and be miserable all the time. Or I could do the really hard thing, which was to change my state, to get out of that environment. And I could have stayed, right? A lot of people do, and they just figure it out or whatever. And I'm not saying everyone needs to leave their marriage. That's not what I'm advocating. In fact, I wish I could have stayed. But there's that 10% of the time when you say, okay, I've read 100 books on this. Here's the opportunity right in front of me, the choice to do something different, to practice gratitude, to give the benefit of the doubt, to heal, to forgive. Some of the hardest things, do I do it? Yes or no? Those are the moments you become changed, is when you watch yourself. It's almost like you're up and seeing yourself, and your brain's constantly watching your actions. So then you become someone who is compassionate, who practices gratitude, who does see the glass half full or whatever it is, but you have to do the thing. At the end of the day, there's always an action step, and you don't get a ton of them. Maybe you don't even get one every single day,
Yeah.
But you recognize that moments, I can do the thing I've always done, or I can choose to do the new thing and the more maybe evolved thing or whatever to become a better person. And do I, yes or no?
In those moments of deciding or not deciding which direction you go, sometimes there can be feelings of regret. Like, I mean, even you just mentioned, I wish that I could have stayed in the marriage, right? Like, and this is a marriage that we have just identified as there was a clear problem, there was infidelity, and there was a decision to leave. That I wish that I could. How do you talk to clients, friends, people that you work with, people that you mentor about this feeling of regret? I wish that I just stayed in my job and I didn't go off and start this thing that failed, or whatever that laundry list of things may be that someone's reflecting on. How do you help them find an angle to look at that at, or process that?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things, and I'm sure you're familiar with Mark Manson and the subtle art of not giving a fuck. One of the things that he says, and I love this, he says the most confident people are confident what they don't have. He's like, the most secure people are confident in what they don't have. They're okay with what they don't have. So life is always choices, right? Every time I say yes to something, I'm saying no to something else.
Right.
So what I said in that last little bit was, I wish I could have stayed. I didn't say I wish I stayed.
Right.
And so that's a big difference, right?
Fair.
So I think that the most important thing is to realize that if you regret a decision or you regret an action, that it was what you wanted in the moment.
Right.
And that's true. So the only thing we can do from that is make peace with it and then decide moving forward if we're going to make decisions in a different way. So let's say, someone does quit their job, their full-time job, and they go all in on this online business thing. And a year into online business, they're like, God, I wish I had the security of getting that paycheck every 2 weeks that I got my last job. I wish I didn't quit. Wow, it's looking like it's better over there now. What are their options? They can't go back to that job. So the first thing is they have to get right with their decision. They have to go, you know what, I made this decision for a reason. I jumped online and I believed in myself for a reason. How do I actualize that? How do I activate that power that I had? The reason why I left, right? How do I get right with that decision? And then 2, what am I learning about my decision making that I can take into the next decision? The lesson here is I value certainty. So while I might not have as much certainty in my online business because things are growing and they're in ebb and flow, how can I create certainty in my life somewhere? What does that look like? Okay, maybe I go and get a part-time gig somewhere. So I know at least I have a little bit of money coming in. Cool, that would be a solution. I know that about myself. I'm not okay with 100% uncertainty. I need a little safety. So how do I go and find that? So I think it's getting right with your decision and realizing that the negative self-talk of, I don't trust myself to make decisions. I can't trust my future decisions. Like, I think that's all just catastrophizing, right? It's like, just because you made one decision that maybe wasn't the best decision for you doesn't mean you're a bad decision maker. Don't make it mean this like permanent, pervasive thing. It's just like, that was one thing. And then what can you learn from it moving forward? It's one of those things that there's really just not a lot of utility in regret, except if you find the lesson and then change your behavior moving forward, that's really all you have.
I really like what you touched on, and this is a very important part for any kind of venture outside of a traditional job. And I can speak to this specifically on growing an online subscription business for the ski system, which I'm in the process of right now, much more at the genesis stage than where you are with the online component that you've built. And one thing that's very easy to do is to get 15 steps in and look back and go, I don't know, wait, it's not. Because you do all this math in the beginning that convinces you it's a good idea. Or if I just get 1,000 people to spend $1,000 a year, that's $1 million. How easy is that? Oh, it's social media and online marketing and MailChimp and YouTube, and it's going to be so easy. It's going to be fucking hard as shit. That's the fact. It's not going to be easy. And there's going to be 100 days when you just want to stop and you wish that you didn't. But that's everybody's story. Look at Nike. Look at even last night while we were watching this documentary on. Do you remember And One? They're a basketball shoe company, but they used to do this like street ball mixtape tour. These were three guys out of Wharton, business students. They launched this company. They ended up getting in a position to sign with Stephen Marbury when he was the first round draft pick to the NBA, put him on a 10-year contract for a shoe that was on the market for the first time in a year. Previous year and a half, they were selling T-shirts out of the back of a car. They sign this guy, and in the very first game of the NBA, he rolls his ankle. And it burned at the stake their shoe company overnight because they're literally supposed to supply ankle support and ability, and they don't. And these are not dumb guys, right? These are very smart dudes. But they didn't, and they didn't stop. They went, you know what? Okay, that sucked. That was hard. What can we learn from this? What's the next step forward we can take? What's the next thing we do? Because your original point is you left for a reason. You started this because you saw something. You felt that you had a place in the online space. You knew that you could connect with people that you don't know yet, and you could help them realize their fitness goals, realize their personal development goals, their business goals. And you have to remind yourself that there's almost a responsibility to that. And if you stop and you go back, you're actually doing a disservice, one, to yourself, your family, but two, to all the people that haven't experienced what you're offering yet. And a lot of that's just a growth and a marketing problem. People don't know you exist.
Right. No, it's so true. And it's one of those things where, there's just always going to be problems. I think once you get right with that, so there's sort of like two types of people, and I talk about this with my students all the time. This is what we call failure expectation. There are some people who just expect it's going to be hard. They go into it and they go, all right, I know it's going to be hard. I know it's not going to be linear. I know it's not going to be predictable. I know that there's going to be some setbacks, so that when those things inevitably come up, they go, oh, okay, here it is. And they're more equipped to work around it or find some way to pivot or to do something else, versus some people have a very rigid mindset. And again, they expect it's going to be easy. They go A plus B equals C. I mean, you're building your online business. You know that it's not linear. You're like, okay, I have this, I have these people on social media. Surely they'll buy my program, right? It's like, no. Right? Like, you're not marketing yet. Yep. They're like, didn't even see it. So that's one of the hard things is I always tell my students, like, look, there are always going to be problems. I don't care what level of business you're at. Your only job is to get better problems, to take enough massive action to earn yourself new problems. Like, so for me, the reason why we actually moved full-time, JillFit full-time online was I had 5 coaches working for me. We were doing virtual training and virtual nutrition coaching over the internet. We had like over 100 clients, but all of my coaches were maxed out. They were like, Jill, I can't take any more clients. And it was a great problem to have, but it was still a problem. And it forced me to seek out mentorship and invest in my business to learn how to leverage my time better and learn how to leverage the coach's time better. And so take enough massive action. I'm a huge, and you'll get this as a personal trainer, huge advocate of overwhelming yourself to the point where you have the ability to be more discerning. Yes. How many personal trainers get started and they're like, well, I don't want to take any clients in the morning, or I don't want to take any clients on Saturday. And I'm like, y'all, I was working 7 days a week, split shift every day for a decade. And you know what I was able to do as a result of that? I had choices. I was able to increase my price, charge more than anyone else in my area. I was able to move online. I was able to pick and choose who I worked with. And I was able to set my own schedule. But I wouldn't have been able to do that from day one. I wasn't good. No one knew me. I didn't have a reputation. And so this all comes down to branding. Is like, how are you setting yourself up so that later on you're able to make those decisions?
You touched on maybe my favorite point, which is that I wasn't good yet. And I think that right now, especially with how available everybody else's end result is to you, when you just open your phone, what are you going to see? Everyone doing the best. The biggest house that they've ever bought, the fastest they've ever ran, the most clients they've ever had. So you see that and you're just like, well, compared to where I am today, this is horrible. I must be in the wrong business because there's no way I'll ever get there. Whatever negative self-talk just inevitably floods in and takes over your mind. But you don't see the time it took them to get there. But more importantly than that, you don't understand yet how important it is to be bad for a while, because there's mistakes that you cannot make at scale. They will kill your business. But you can make them when you have 10 subscribers. You can make them when you have 100 subscribers. You can't make them when you have 5,000 subscribers. Because if you think of any business that you subscribe to, or let's say you love a specific coffee shop, and every time that you go anywhere, you always make sure to go to that one. If they completely destroyed your life one time, you'd never go back, ever. 100% no. It would take so much to regain your business. And I can say this even from like the podcast production side. there's errors that I was making in the beginning that I could not make now. There's just no way. People wouldn't listen. They would hear bad audio one time. They'd never come back to hear another episode. They would hear a really loud transition that jerks the wheel in their car because you didn't have the levels right on the post-production. Those little kind of things, it's the developmental skill that you're getting. It's getting strong over time versus trying to get strong in the first week that you ever join a gym and train. You're going to get injured, period.
Well, and also you said the magic word, which is skill. And so I think we sometimes forget that. You know, I don't, like, if you're a personal trainer, health coach, or someone in the wellness space, and you work with people in person, either at a gym or across the desk or whatever, and you go online, you're not supposed to know how to do online business. It's a whole new skill set. Totally. And yet I think we assume, we're like, well, it's just social media, right? It's common sense. You just post some stuff and people see it and they want to work with you. And it's like, oh, this is, people go to grad school for this, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, you have to show yourself some grace as you're learning. I always tell my students, it's like learning a new language, like learning a musical instrument. You're not supposed to know how to do it. And so to your point, these skills are by nature things that you start to get better at: marketing, selling, messaging, lead generation, product development, you know, market research, like all these things that are required. You're not supposed to know that. And people really beat themselves up. They just got online 2 months ago and they're not making 10K months yet. And they're like, what's wrong with me? And it's like, nothing's wrong with you.
You're doing everything right.
Yeah. So I think, you know, there is a little bit of a wake up call for a lot of people who want to come in and they go, well, it's just super simple, right? You just post and then people buy. And it's like, no, there's a lot more that's, especially now because the space is more saturated than it was when I started in 2010. And so I think people just need to be ready for that. That's when we come back to like that failure expectation, realize that I think a lot of people have major wake up calls when, and I'd be interested in your take on this because you said that you sort of went online during the pandemic. I work with a lot of pandemic businesses where people jumped online because the gyms were closed and like kind of had fast success because a lot of their clients just jumped online. They were doing Zoom classes and, you know, they were like, all of a sudden, I don't want to go back to the gym. This is pretty nice. I can do this from home. But then they either continue to learn business or they have to go back to the gym because that success, once the clients go back to the gym, they don't have their members anymore. So you have to either iterate and be like, okay, now I'm serious about learning internet business and reaching more people, or I just have to go back to the gym. So that first launch, we had a lot of people who had a lot of success during the pandemic. And now that people are back in the gyms and they're back in person, they're going, where are all the people? How come this isn't working? And they're getting a little bit of a wake up call. I call it the pandemic boomerang. And so at that point, if you are a professional who wants to stay online, you have to learn business. And to me, that's, you know, seeking out mentorship, courses, whatever it is that you have to do, but you're not supposed to know how to do it. So you have to be gentle with yourself.
I think in that stage, it was everything that we talked about. I mean, a lot of where I was, you know, like I said in the beginning before we started this, cut from the same cloth. I was like, where do I need to sign up? What time do I need to be there? I'll be the first there. I'll be the last leave. I'm just going to build this business, and I want to be a trainer, and I don't care what it takes to do it. Right. So when you go into it with that mindset, you've already made your bed. You just got to go to sleep. And so it makes that part easy because then you don't deal with the minutia of the, I don't want to be here early, or this person said no. Like, you just in one ear out the other because you're looking for the yeses. It just doesn't matter. Yeah. And I think having that mindset, and it's kind of funny, we talked about just like the self-help and the mindset shaping and all this kind of stuff that's just been part of my life forever. When the pandemic hit, there wasn't a millisecond that went by that my mindset wasn't just like, cool, let's do it. There's 100% from the day that we shut down. I went in there on the 15th. I tried to go to work on the 16th. The doors were shut. And I was the first trainer of all the trainers at Equinox, and then helped spearhead alongside with the East Coast and corporate and everything to onboard everyone into this virtual area, because I saw that not only was it necessary, it was mandatory. You had an influx of people that all of a sudden legitimately overnight have nowhere to train, nowhere to instill their habits, their lifestyle changes that they've been working on for God knows how long. And so it wasn't like, oh, should we do this? It was like, no, we do this now. And we need to onboard people and make it seamless. Make this something that everyone's comfortable doing. Provide your vocal coaching skills versus any kind of physical contact or manipulation. And let's just make this seamless. And I think when your value proposition is in the right space mentally from the beginning, it helps guide you through these crazy parts. Like, an influx of members or people that are signing up for reasons such as, I don't know what to do, which happened to a lot of, online creators, people that jumped in the online space. It was ripe for the picking. So what's everyone going to do? One, they're going to try a lot of different things out. So you saw memberships increase overall. You just saw a lot more users on a lot of different platforms consuming content that they never consumed. Now the gyms are back open. Now more things are back open. More things have popped up that weren't there before. And people are faced with a choice. But I think that the people that are winning, it's because they weren't so concerned with getting the numbers. They were concerned with giving a good, real, genuine product. And now on the other side of it, the member, the user can't go get that somewhere else because
Totally.
they have 2 years of personal relationship and understanding and one-on-one with these people. And they understand them and care for them better than the pandemic did and better than all the other businesses that are available. So I think, there are some people on the flip side of that too that did so well and will continue to do well that basically it was that once in a century thing that can catapult the hell out of your business to this crazy level. Like that girl Mad Fit, for example, on YouTube went from 200,000 subscribers to 2.5 million and just sustained, right? Launched a fitness app alongside of that.
Yep.
I think that's no one knows unless you talk to her, and I haven't, how many failures there were between 0 subscribers and 200. How many times she probably didn't want to keep going and kept going. How many times people are like, you need to get a real job. How many times she said no to a client to focus on production. Because then something comes along and you're primed for it. You understand marketing and lead generation and all the different Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all these things. So now you're the person that's ready for it. And you'll never know when that's going to happen because the future hasn't occurred.
Well, and that's such a good point. I mean, there's many things there, but what you're sort of saying is, and this is why I don't ever wish virality on anybody, because you're not the person that you need to be quite yet to handle it. So, and I know it sounds like kind of I don't know, maybe that sounds obnoxious. I hope you don't grow too fast or make too much money, but I think the idea that, you see people Reels and with TikToks, and I don't know if it was that chick, I forget, from a couple of years ago, that gal who blew up online, then she didn't deliver on her products, and then she got sued by the state of Texas, this whole big thing. I forget her name was Brittany something. But that's an example of someone who had really fast success and then didn't have the infrastructure and also wasn't the person. And you know this, that if you have to, I don't want to say struggle through something, but you work hard at a goal and you are dealing with all of those setbacks and obstacles and pivot moments and all those kind of things, that changes you in here. So, but that by the time you reach those 10K months or that 6-figure business or that 7-figure business or whatever it is that you're trying to work towards, you're ready for it. You can handle it. This past year, 18 months of JillFit, we brought on 3 new executive team members and another 3 coaches. And I wouldn't have been able to do that a couple of years ago. I wasn't ready. I wasn't the kind of manager and leader I needed to be to lead a team. And so you have to just honor where you're at. And to your point is, once you make the first decision, the decision is I'm going online, I'm going all in. Then you do whatever it takes. The first decision is always the hardest one, right? Then after that, it's just a series of smaller decisions. Okay, I committed to this. So these problems come up. I think people make it harder on themselves, and I hate marketers ruin everything, and I'm a marketer. But the promise of fast success, we see this in the fitness space, right? Lose 7 pounds in 3 days, whatever it is, right? Lose 60 pounds in 30 days. We see it everywhere, and it's the same thing in business. You can show up online and be making 10K months in the first 90 days. And unfortunately, that is not the norm. In fact, I don't know anyone who's really done that, unless maybe they have some virality or they have some paid, have a lot of money to put into paid traffic. But for the most part, that's not the case. And so I deal with a lot of students who come in and they think that it's going to be simple and it's going to be easy and it's going to be I'm going to just quit my full-time job and go all in on this. I'm always yes, but maybe you want to keep that side job.
Totally.
Make sure you can pay your bills, because then that's a place of power. Instead of coming into my business with urgency and scarcity and desperation, right? That's palpable. That's never going to be a good productivity system. But if I come in with abundance and excitement and passion and purpose, because I know that at least my job at Starbucks is paying for my bills, now all of a sudden I can give fully to this new thing without having to stress all the time. And so I don't love this like burn the ships mentality. I think some people like that. They're like, leave yourself no outs. I see that, but it's for a very specific kind of person. Most of the people I work with are moms. They are midlife, and they're like, yeah, I'm scared of showing up on social media. So you should probably wade into those waters rather than just jump in.
There's definitely the pro, like my training career, the pro was that I left my old job with like $500 in my bank account. And I was
But you were what? You were probably in your 20s.
Yeah,
right?
no, totally. Like I was primed for it. I had mentally committed to it. I was like, well, here we go. And like, yeah, let's be honest. I didn't have a family. I wasn't married. I didn't have a mortgage.
I'm sleeping on couches, right?
So if I burned, I would just kick back onto my college resume and my job history, and I would go get a new job. So I agree with that. I think that what the sink or swim mentality does for the right type of person, and that's a very key part here, is that it is not for the risk adverse, but what it does do for the right type of person, it motivates the hell out of you, because it's like getting in your car and driving 16 hours. You're somewhere else. Like you gotta, you're living in a new place. There's no going back. And so there is some psychological benefit to that. But especially after coming out of, the pandemic and seeing the devastation that it did and didn't cause in different areas for people financially, I think that you also just need to be wise. If you have a job that's giving you $70,000 a year and it's not stressful, it's not taking, your hair is not turning gray, and you have the time and the availability to build something on the side, you would actually be a fool to leave what's giving you the resources to fund the other thing. Because what you'll find in the first couple of months, year, 2 years, whatever, of growing something, it takes money, and then all the money you make, it better be going right back into that shit. Because if it's not, and you're trying to pocket it to, buy vacations or something, mindset's misaligned there. Like that money needs to go right back in. And if it's a course that you can learn to better use MailChimp, if it's something that you can take so that you can better understand Facebook marketing, whatever it is, those resources should be pulled back in so that they can help grow your thing. Because that's the only way that thing becomes something that then goes, look, you can't stay at your Starbucks job anymore, because every hour that you spend there, you're taking away hours that your business really needs you. Yep. But it takes awareness to know which of those two places that you're at so that you can make those decisions.
There's
Go ahead.
Definitely like there's like a gap, right? So this is a question I get asked all the time. How do I know when I'm ready? And I always just say, you'll know when you know. It's never going to feel 100% safe. So there's going to be like a little piece of like this safety, security, unknown, right? So there's gonna be a tiny little gap there, but that's where you have the self-trust to go, like you were alluding to earlier. I don't know what's going to look like, but I trust myself to be able to handle it, to get resourceful if I need to. And I think, if you sit and you wait and to feel like 100%, like I always tell people, like you're probably not going to be making dollar for dollar in your online business exactly what you're making in your full-time gig. Like don't wait for that, right? We don't have to wait for like, okay, right. I make $80,000 a year, I make $80,000 a year, and then I can jump ship. It's like, and I always ask my students, like, what's the minimum amount that you can be making online to be able to cover your bills and be able to live? And that's your number. It's not the cushy 6-figure desk job you have right now. It doesn't have to be that. Because to your point, your passion and your excitement and your purpose is going to make you do what you need to do over here. More than you ever would care about your cubicle job. You're going to care so much more about this thing because it's your baby. And you're going to go to work and make it happen. So it doesn't have to be a 1-for-1, but it definitely needs to be, you need to have something so at least you're not, or unless you're like, if you're a 20-year-old dude and you're like, I'm fine sleeping on couches, then like go for it. But if you are, some of the people I work with, they have a lot more, especially I think women too, and this is a generalization, but women have a lot of more, in my mind, I don't want to say self-doubts because I know men do as well, but they question themselves a lot more and they're like, can I really do this? And they do these mental aerobics of like, am I good enough? And I don't like, they just haven't had that experience yet. And a lot of them are maybe just certified, right? So they don't have the 10 years in the gym that you and I had to see that show of evidence that we're good. And so you have to know yourself, which is always full circle moment comes right back to personal development. It's like, how kind of person am I? Are you certainty driven? Like, I'm more autonomy driven. So for me, I would much rather have less certainty, more autonomy.
Yes.
But other people are just safety and certain. And by the way, not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, right? Not everyone's built for entrepreneurship. So it's okay to tap out. If something's not working and you're like constantly anxious, constantly, like, you need to have like moments in your business of building your business where it's fun and you're excited. Yeah. And if every second you're so stressed about money and doing something, go get a job. It doesn't mean you're a quitter or anything. It just means like that's the best for you. Get some security, right? And I used to think anyone could do this, and I just don't think that anymore. I think there are some personality traits that you really have to have, or you have to build in order to be successful here, because there is a lot of moving parts.
I think what you said too about and this is such like a misconception, is that the dollar for dollar amount needs to be equal for you to make the next step. It should really be the opposite. It should be that you leave when you're the most comfortable with being the least comfortable, but your needs are met. Like, yes. You should never leave your job to start a side business and then miss a car payment or miss your mortgage or not be able to send a loved one money that you're sending.
Credit card up or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't put yourself in debt to start your thing. But like, there should be a point where if you can ask yourself, like, if I had 6 zeros in the end of my bank account, what am I going to do tomorrow? I'm going to wake up and I'm going to schedule podcasts. I know that. I love having these conversations. They're a really special time for me. And I'm a good example of what we're talking about, because this show, as we're talking about it, is in this transitional phase. It's in a growth phase. It's not the biggest show that you've ever heard of, right? It's growing, and it's growing alongside a bread and butter business where I coach people, and that's my skill set. And I've done it for 10 years, and I love doing it. And it's amazing to be able to give back to the people that I coach, and trying to grow these other two things on the side. If I could snap my fingers and be doing those 100% full time, I don't even know if I would do that right now, because of exactly what we talked about. There's lessons that I haven't learned yet as a host, as a conversationalist, as a listener, as a speaker, that will only happen in the next 150, 200 episodes. And when you start to wrap your head around that, it's almost like a new veil of clarity that you get. That's like, okay, it's okay to be here.
It's okay to be not good quite yet, right? No one gets to like start off and be amazing at it. I remember I look back at my old YouTube videos in like 2008, 2009. Terrible. Yeah. Like, I was mumbling and I was looking down.
The light's bad.
Yeah, it was like someone like commented, YouTube, it's the best. The comment section is so good. It's like, are you in a jail cell? Like, seriously, I was like an electrical outlet above my head. I was saying all the time, mumbling. I don't even know what I was saying, but you know what? I kept showing up. And to your point, right, you keep pressing publish. And what you said earlier in the episode, which is, now's the time to mess up. This is the smallest your 100%. Audience is ever going to be right now. So get your shitty first drafts like out of the way now, so that when you have more eyes on you, you can show up in a different capacity. But I don't know anyone that gets to skip steps. I just don't think that's possible.
I would, before we close, because I know that you have to get out of here at noon, I would love to know what you think about and how you deal with comparison.
Yeah. So I will say, and I don't want this to come off like patronizing, but I do think comparison is a little bit more of a beginner issue, only because there's so many things that you could do. So let's just take building your online business and your social media presence or whatever, your brand, as an example. When you get online, you don't have you don't see all the angles quite yet, so everything feels really important. That makes sense. Like, everything feels really important. You're like, I need to start a podcast. I need to, I don't know, host a summit, and I need to get my email up, and I need to get this lead magnet up, and you have all these things. And if you're new, everything has the same level of importance. You don't have the ability to be discerning. Oh yeah, that's for me. That's not for me.
Right.
So one of the best things to help you overcome comparison is really just knowing yourself. So for example, you might be listening to Abe's show and you're like, oh, I would love to start a podcast. That sounds so fun. You have to ask yourself, like, okay, am I even good at speaking? Do I like speaking? Am I committed to learning? There's a learning curve. There's equipment you got to get, right? Software stuff. So filter everything through. Is that for me? Could I see myself doing that? I'll give you another example. I used to be a figure competitor,
That's why I asked, actually, because I knew that you had a unique perspective in that you have business comparison possibilities and the physical body image one-on-one comparison.
Yeah, so as a fitness competitor, obviously you get ready for shows, you get super lean, you get up on stage, whatever. And when I decided to stop competing in 2010, there was a buffer phase where I was like, really, I would feel triggered by other women who were getting ready to step on stage, and they were so lean and their bodies were so beautiful. And I had to check myself and ask myself, like, here's the thing with comparison. You can covet the outcome. I can look at that physique of someone. I work out at Gold's Gym in Venice now sometimes, and I'm like, these women walk around and they're just like, they're weeks from stage, right? I can covet the outcome, but I always have to ask myself, do I actually want to do what it takes? And the answer is no. I've done that. I don't want to do a competition diet. I don't want to be like so solely focused on getting up on stage. And so when you say, oh, podcast sounds so cool. Can you see yourself, and do you actually want to do the things that it would take to have a successful podcast or to get up on stage? And the answer for me oftentimes is no, or at least no right now. So I think if you're a beginner deciding what's for me right now, which is why I'm such a huge fan of mentorship, I think it can feel really overwhelming, and people tell me, like, it's just, you're scrolling your feed, right? Every business coach has something that they're championing, and you feel like you have to jump ship and then now go do that. So that's why I'm a huge fan of like just choosing, and this is in fitness as well, right? Just choosing one coach and following them all the way through to the end. And then you can decide, what did I learn? What do I still need? Who has that? Who should I go to next? Huge fan of mentorship. I'm still 12 years into my business, still have a mentor, still in a mastermind as a participant. So I think you have to decide, who do I want to listen to, and then just listen to them and put your blinders on. And so if you're in the beginning, I want to remind you, not everything is super important, but find a coach that can see all the angles and tell you, hey, this stuff, not for you right now. Podcast, maybe in a couple of years, but let's focus on this right now. What are the big down movers, and what are the things that you have permission to not pay attention to? And I think that's really important.
I mean, mentorship's like, it's funny that it has such a stigma to it, because show me an athlete on a team without a coach. It's just, it's ingrained in, it's how you improve. It's how you get insights into your blind spots. It's how you are pushed when you should be pushed. And it's how you're roped back in when you're too far ahead. It's just having that external set of eyes that isn't attached to your exact psyche. It can be so valuable in a fitness setting, in a business setting, in a marketing setting, whatever it is, because you get insights that you cannot get on your own. And
whenever I talk to my friends, my peers who do this too, like entrepreneur friends, it's never a matter of if, it's who. Who do I need to learn from next? That's it. It's never like, are you going to be in a mastermind? Are you gonna, have a mentor? It's like, who are you working with next year, right? Who are you working with this year? That's it. And so I know, and it's weird because beginners are the least likely to invest in mentorship, right? So
because you think you can do it all yourself.
Right, and success leaves clues. I don't know one successful person that hasn't had a string of mentors or has current mentors. So it's a cheat code. And the irony is that the people who need it the most, right, beginners, are the least likely to invest in it.
Well, and expand that to anything. What does the president have? Advisors. What does the CEO have? A board of directors. It's not a nuanced thing to entrepreneurs, but it seems like that. Because I'm going to do it by myself. That's the whole venture in the first place. I'm going to do it alone. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm separate from look to any business. It's how they're structured. It's structured to give support to the person making decisions. So it'll eliminate the fear around it because it's useful, and it'll push you to areas that you didn't know that you could go in a really positive light.
100%. Love it.
I could do this for hours. Literally, I could talk and keep this conversation going. So we'll have to do it again in the future, Jill. I want to be respectful of your time, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to be on here. It's been awesome.
Yeah, me too. Love this conversation. For sure, we'll do a part 2. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you guys for listening.
Of course.